Today, my guest is Cathy Bryce, who leads AIB's corporate, international investment banking and business banking activities and is a member of the Executive Management Committee of the bank. I'm delighted to welcome you to the show. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, James.
Thank you very much for having me in today to chat about this very important podcast around career transition. You might just tell me who you are and what you do and what you're most proud of in your working life.
Okay, thanks very much for the opportunity. So my name is Cathy Bryce. James knows me as Cathy Brophy, which was my name before I got married. And I am Managing Director of the Corporate and Business Banking Division of AIB. My career has been in financial services, totally. I'm sorry to say, but it's, having said that, it's been very, very interesting. And I guess I'm most proud of today being the first female in AIB to run a P&L division of the bank. So very proud of that achievement, not just for myself personally, but I think for all of the women who would have worked in AIB over the years. And I think it is a sign of the financial services sector and indeed of AIB moving forward in terms of gender diversity.
That's great. That's fascinating. And going back, people always ask me in my recruitment, with my recruitment hat on, the mistakes they've made or I've made. So what mistakes have you made in your career, if any, and the impact and then the learning? And it could be from small stuff to kind of serious stuff if you want to share it. Yeah.
I've made plenty of mistakes and careers are full of choices and you do make mistakes. But what I would say to people is that everything is correctable, and it is, I think, about a bit of resilience and perseverance as well. I certainly feel I've been rewarded with perseverance to a degree. So I think mistakes have been sometimes not being ambitious enough or not being brave enough at times. So I would have had opportunities to go start my own activities outside, in financial services outside of the bank at times, and I was a little bit too cautious and maybe missed things. But I have been nonetheless rewarded with a long career within AIB, I guess partly as a result of that. But I would say to people, probably don't be afraid of being brave in careers. And I think particularly these days, with workplace being so much more flexible, that there's great opportunities for people to be brave, to go out on their own, but don't be afraid to fail at things. And
is there anything you can think back, or a funny moment where, one of mine was I had a Japanese client come to me from a very famous aircraft leasing company, and I'd been schooled on how I should greet him, and I had to bow and he'd present his business card, and then I'd present my business card, and it was all going very well. He came in, I bowed, I smiled, I did everything right. I had my business card in my left of my suit pocket. He'd passed his card across to me. I looked at it, I bowed back, I went in to get my card, I passed across from him. I said, "This is great," and I realised I'd given him a dart ticket, which I put in my to my consternation in my head, and I said, "Oh God, I've ruined this because I've shown him disrespect." But I saw a flicker of a smile in his eyes, and he got it. But I suppose what saved me that I had carried out the process of respect.
Right.
And I was the guy since then who all the Japanese of his colleagues would say, "Can we have a dart ticket, James San?"
Well, if I go back right to the beginning of my career, I worked in investment banking for the US investment bank, Morgan Stanley, and I didn't quite know the drill at that stage as a young graduate, not realising that when you go on trips with senior people, that the done thing is that the graduate pays for everything. And so I remember being in a taxi with the managing director, and we get to the end of the journey and I'd no cash to pay, and he certainly didn't have any cash, so there was consternation, and I learned from that experience.
Always go to the ATM before you...
Yeah, always go to the ATM or have the credit card. Of course, yeah.
That's good. That's a great story, and the simple things, but I suppose you learn from them, but they can be tough.
We talk about attention to detail, so doing presentations for different companies, and Morgan Stanley, the name of the client was always at the front, and often at times you would be up to literally 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning finishing these presentations, and then grab the books, and you'd be on the first flight in the morning out somewhere in Europe. So there was a great story of not me now, but one of my fellow grads arriving, and the book, rather than saying United Airlines, said Untied Airlines.
How did they receive it? Did they send you humour?
I think so, yes. Yeah, they tried to open the front page as quickly as possible so nobody noticed.
But they'll never forget him.
No.
which may be a good thing,
Yeah.
So if you didn't start off in financial services banking, when you look back, is there anything you would have done? Like for examples I would use, a professional golfer. I know you're a good golfer, I believe. Single handicap. Photographer, mixologist, which is someone who makes cocktails. Is there anything that you sort of like not fun job, but something you'd say, oh my God, I'd love to do that? Yeah,
well, I guess sport would have been great. If I'd been good enough to do sport full time. I used to play a lot of hockey, and I do golf as well. I think that it would have been marvelous to be a professional. I admire also hugely musicians and people with that sort of talent, and I don't have any talent in that area, but to have careers like that, I think is wonderful.
What's it about musicians that you admire?
I think it's just this innate talent. I mean, able to do that as your life, career, where it's all encompassing, I guess.
And the pressure for each performance, because you're as good as your next perperformance.
No, that is tough. But I think that if the people who really love it, then they're so passionate about it that I'm not sure that they notice
banking's
that too
not
much. No, my father actually was a banker, as you know, James, and I suppose somewhere I had this idea that banking was a career for me, and I was very close to, after leaving college, going to be an accountant, and then between various things got offered a job in investment banking, and I've enjoyed banking all my career, and I suppose I'm very lucky to have been able to do something that I have really enjoyed, and that's also would be advice that I would give to people. You do need to enjoy it, and you need to have an affinity to what you're doing.
And I would find in my recruitment space that if some people come in, maybe younger people, they're not happy with their career, and sometimes for very good reasons, or they've been in a job for 2 years or 3 years and I'm ready to move on, it's not providing enough for me. There's a lot of pressure in some of these jobs. What advice would you give someone like that as to what process should they when they're having that conversation in their head, what process should they go in their head?
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's that they're not enjoying it because the hours are very long or something, then but they like what they're doing, then I would be saying you need to maybe have a conversation with your organization or with your people manager to try to see if you can reset the bar in some way. If through the discussion you realize they just don't have a great affinity for that organization or for the type of work they're doing, then I would be saying life's too short and go find.
If they're using the wrong lens, though, and maybe looking at it as too narrow a lens, they just haven't been able to see the bigger picture. Have you come across that?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think quite quickly if I see people who come in who might have interviewed very well, but after a few months you realise that there's just no glint in their eye. They're just not enjoying. They're not enjoying. Somehow the work is not at all interesting to them. I'd like to think you'd take them aside and say, look, no pressure here, but are you happy? And if you're not happy, think about this, and let's see how we can support you to
it's a proactive response. A little bit, I suppose, of calling someone out appropriately to say, "Come on, are you getting a buzz out of this or not?"
Yeah, and equally, you can see people who really eat and drink the work, because they have this enthusiasm emanating out of them.
I'm in my recruitment over 30 years. I would say maybe 60% of people don't like what they do because they get sucked into it. That's my sense. Now, it's slightly different with the younger generation because there's a much more movement in their careers and obviously the type of industries that have evolved, particularly over the last 10 years.
Yes,
but that's my sense, because people spend 5, 10, 15, 20 years within the same organisation and not really moving at all, doing the same job. So it's interesting,
Yeah. I don't know. I think that can happen. All right. I think people enjoy, at least initially, and it can that people stay in the same place and are not proactive enough about either moving within the organisation that they're working in or looking externally. And I say to my team now that I'm really keen for people to consider more lateral moves and getting themselves sort of re-jolted almost with a new challenge every number of years, because I think it's really good for the person. I think it's very good for the organisation then as well.
It's fresh as well.
Yeah, people need a new challenge after a while, definitely. Yeah. And organisations have been poor about facilitating that, I think.
And is that because of leadership deficiencies, or leaders are also human and coping themselves with where they're at, or
I think
it's a mixture of everything?
I think it can be leadership and down to a sort of a selfish point, which is I have somebody in a job, they're performing very well, they know the ropes, I don't want to give those up. That
creates a problem for me. Yeah,
that's a problem. Yeah, and that we need to be better at that.
It's interesting. 5 words describe your career.
Sticking with it, I think. Sticking with it. I have. So I've worked for quite a long time in AIB, although I did take a career move recently, and I was fortunate enough to be able to come back into the organisation. But during my career in AIB, it had a lot of ups and downs, and I remember hearing a talk from someone. The head of Goldman Sachs about 10 or 12 years ago, and he was speaking to mainly it was in Harvard, and he was mainly speaking to the MBA class, and his advice was careers are a long road. Don't think you have to solve it in the first 10 years. It is a long road, and you take the ups and downs, and don't try and push it too much too quickly. Opportunity, be patient was his advice, which I thought was interesting, particularly for someone who'd worked in investment banking, which can be a very, very tough and demanding and cutthroat career. And that was his advice, and I think there is a lot to be said for that. There is also jumping on the opportunities, and being entrepreneurial where you see an opportunity as well. But I think sometimes people just want too much too quickly, and they get frustrated then if they don't get it. Whereas I think a little bit of perseverance.
And is that why do you think that is? Or is that like, if you look 10 years ago or 20 years ago, comparing and contrasting, which is probably an unfair thing to do, but just why do people, or just the opportunities are there in a full economy? Does that drive it?
A little bit of that. I mean, it's ambition, obviously. And I think they're looking at pals who may have, whose path has accelerated more quickly, and they get a little bit jealous and want to push their path. And all I would say is you want to compare over the long term, not over a 3 year or 5 year period. It's really about the long term. If you're enjoying what you're doing and you're learning, don't be worrying that you're not getting promoted.
It's a car crash at the end, is it?
Yeah.
Because they're not ready for it, and they don't have the skill sets.
More dangerous for their career.
It's very debilitating that when it happens.
Yeah.
If someone blows up.
Yeah, it's much worse
no fault of their own.
than not getting promoted sufficiently. Yeah.
So would you be an advocate of a career coach or a mentor, or did you have a mentor on your way? Did you say, what do you think? What's the next 5 years look? Or
Yeah, I didn't really use mentorship as well as I could have, and I do try and do a lot of mentoring now, just outside of banking. I think it can be extremely useful to use mentors at different stages. I'm not sure I'd advocate using a mentor all of the time. I think there's points in your career that you're really looking for a bit of a steer, and that's very helpful. I use a mentor currently in my job, someone from a completely different industry, just to try and give me a bit of perspective. But I did get a lot of career advice from the people I reported to, and they were actually, I mean, looking back, really helpful to me in my career. And I think they weren't mentors per se, but they were very supportive.
They're generous with their time and
generous
advice
with their time, and also invested in me, both from a personal perspective and also putting me forward for courses and different things as well. And I'm very grateful for that. So I certainly think mentoring is an important aspect. Everybody should use it. It's just really trying to figure out when's the best time to use it. And the right person. Yeah.
And what advice, so say if I know you've two children, but say a 22-year-old graduate friend of the family says, what advice, I want to do something, what would you advise them to do?
In the same way as I try and advise my two teenagers, is do pick the subjects you enjoy. Try and pick the degree that you think you're going to enjoy. I say pick the job that you think you're going to enjoy, but also don't try and overthink your career and over map it out, because I believe that careers are very fluid, and there's a bit of luck and there's a bit of trial and error in all of this, and if you get working with someone good, it can be in an industry that mightn't necessarily be the right long-term industry for you, but if you're working with someone you really enjoy and you're learning from, then that's fantastic as well. So I think just throw yourself at it. If you think the opportunity is right for you, try it out, and you can always redirect yourself.
And that 22-year-old probably has to be happy to ask questions, even what I call the stupid question, which is
absolutely.
Probably the most important question.
Yeah. And the other bit of advice would be never pick a job for money. Never.
Why is that?
I just think it's the absolute worst, and particularly for a 22-year-old, which I'll pick it because it's going to pay me 10,000 more in the short term. It's all about the long term, and it's all about the most important thing, I think, at that age, in the first 10 years of your career, is that you're going to be learning a lot, and you're going to get exposed to different experiences and good people to work with, rather than what salary you're on. But it's very easy to pick the money, when you're a poor student with a student loan.
And the value. And the last question again is workplace stress, mindfulness, moving job every 3 years. That's the feedback we get in the market. Any comments, any opinions?
I think it is a much bigger feature of today's world. Maybe it's just that we're all much more aware of our mental health than in the past, where it wasn't spoken about so much. I think we all need to manage stress and try and be aware when life is getting stressful. I try and use pastimes like golf to sort of de-stress. I try and be aware of when I'm I'm showing stress points, be it not sleeping properly or something like that. And I think there needs to be more support in the workplace for that sort of thing. We're trying to get better in AIB about well-being and indeed mindfulness and things. The idea of changing jobs every 3 years, I think that is tough. Changing job is, and having done it twice relatively recently, I can certainly attest it is stressful. And so I'm an advocate for changing role every 3 to 5 years. I'm not sure I'm an advocate for saying changing organization every 3 to 5 years, because that is a lot. But some people are made for that. And in fact, if they're not changing organization, they wouldn't be happy. Other people, maybe not so much so.
I suppose you're saying to put a little bit of thought into it.
Yeah.
And see the plus and minuses.
Yeah, it is quite traumatic changing jobs. And it will provide stress. But of course, it provides great opportunities as well, and meeting a whole host of new people and putting yourself into a new work culture. And so there's great benefits to it as well. I'd just say eyes wide open, really, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cathy Bryce, thank you very much for talking to the podcast.
Thank you, James. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Career Scoop, brought to you by Elevate Career Advice and Elevate Executive Selection, Dublin and Birmingham. I'm James Fitzsimons, and I hope you have enjoyed listening. Next week, we'll be talking to Barry Mulligan, businessman and serial investor. Hope to see you there.